Kristi, you are a former police officer who left the force to become a child abuse educator, dedicating your life to helping parents all over the world to protect their children from sexual abuse. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
So, as I just shared with you off air, that my goal and intention for this conversation is to get as much valuable information out of you as possible so that every single person listening to this walks away with tools to protect their kids and the confidence to create a safe, open foundation of communication in their home. So that way, if their child ever does say something that raises alarm bells, they'll know how to respond and how to support them.
Mhm.
So, Christy, let's go back to the beginning. What led you to becoming a police officer and what made you decide to leave the force?
Well, it's a bit of an interesting story. I actually never had any ambition to become a police officer. I didn't think about it as a child. I actually wanted to be a veterinarian. And it wasn't until my own daughter was born and I saw an ad in the paper and it was like, we want women police officers, flexible working arrangements, and I had taken some time off to have my daughter and she was only 9 months old when I saw this ad. And it was I was kind of like at the cusp of, do I go back to work, do I find a different career? And it kind of popped up into my world and I went, oh, I could do that. And it was interesting because I didn't believe that I would get in, so I went and became fitter because I was postpartum. I went and trained. My daughter would go to for a nap at lunchtime, and we lived on a 5 acre property, and I would do hill sprints because we had a paddock that I could run up and down. So I'd do hill sprints during her nap, and and then I got a personal trainer and hadn't been to school in 10 plus years because I was 28 by then. And so I just did everything I could and got it. And when I did finally get the acceptance letter to go get into the police, I was kind of in shock because I was like, well, I'm not the fittest and I'm not the strongest, but they still wanted me. So um, it was quite exciting. And yeah, I don't think I really understood the motivations, but now looking back, I'm pretty sure it was because as a parent, as a mother, you sort of find a different side of yourself in that journey. I don't think I would have even looked at policing if I hadn't have been a parent. So yeah, I became a police officer when she was 2 years old and went through the police academy and then went down into the direction. So I was in the Pilbara of Western Australia working in Karratha, and the senior sergeant up there asked the whole station, who would like to become a specialist child interviewer. And I had a nearly 3 year old at the time, and I put my hand up, and it wasn't something that I was expecting to go down that pathway, but I am so glad I did. And it gave me a lot of purpose and it helped me do more for my community. So I went off and got trained as a specialist child interviewer. And from that moment forward, most of my career has been spent around investigating child sexual abuse and protecting kids from child sexual abuse if I could or where I could. I then became a detective in around 4 years of my career in the police, and then put my hand up again to go to the child abuse squad and again interviewing and investigating child sexual abuse and arresting child sex offenders. And towards the end of my career, that was all I did for the last 2 years almost. I was interviewing kids, investigating cases, and then arresting and charging offenders, and then also managing child sex offenders when they came out of prison. So in a regional centre in Western Australia. So then when I did actually leave the police, I left because of I had PTSD after 10 years in the police and the vicarious trauma that I had been witness to and I had seen. And it wasn't something that I was very proud of. I actually left the police and felt like I'd failed. Took a long time for me to come to grips with the fact that you can't see, hear, and do what I did without having some sort of trauma yourself and it affecting you. And I cared deeply about the kids that I was trying to help, and sometimes I didn't feel like we were doing enough. So yeah, I left with PTSD. In fact, my then nearly 12-year-old said to me, Mum, I don't want you to be a police officer anymore. You're not the same mum I remember. And so I went in and resigned the next day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge. That was leading me to my next question of how would that have felt when you've got a 3-year-old?
Yeah.
seeing and hearing the worst things where someone like me who hasn't been exposed to that, you hear of it from, from accounts like yours that help share, to acknowledge and educate. But besides that, it's kind of like living under a bit of a rock, really.
Yeah, I think same as you, like I had a young child and I was kind of like, well, that happens to other people in other families. You kind of live with this disbelief that it can happen in your family or to your child because it's either not happened to you or it's not happened to anyone you know. And then it's not until you're in the space where you're seeing it day in, day out, and it's happening to every family and everywhere that you go, actually, we've got it wrong. It can happen to anyone and any family. And one of the things that I was very aware of towards the end of my career is that a lot of parents would say to me, I just don't know how we didn't see it happening. How did we not know? And like I was interviewing kids and they were telling me similar stories of grooming and how these people had worked their way in to abuse them. And I would be like, well, how come no one could see this? Like, well, what's going on here? And it's just because there's a lack of awareness around what these people do and how they do it. And that was how, when I was leaving the police, I was just thinking, oh, parents just need to know this. If they knew this, then they could maybe stop these people. Maybe they could pull it, make sure that their kids aren't around people that display these behaviors. I wish I could protect every child, but at the end of the day, I can only help parents protect their own kids, one family at a time. So I just need to be teaching, you and teaching the next person and teaching the next person and whilst I'm teaching you, you're teaching your children, and that's keeping your family, your little people safe. And then hopefully it kind of ripples out, and people are starting to talk about it, and it is happening. Like in the 5 years since I've left the job, I've seen families, parents who have been, paying attention to my account, following me, and doing that, and they're reporting back. I've talked to my sister, I've talked to my auntie, I've talked to my neighbors' kids. Like people are sharing this information and being more aware. So it is working, and it's more than what I could have done in the police, because when you're a police officer, you come in after the fact. It's already happened. There is no preventing abuse when you're a police officer. So, and there's so little justice. So it's really about my focus and my aim today is why I focus on prevention, is because if I could just stop children from going through what I saw the kids that I interviewed and the families that I interviewed go through, then my soul might feel a little bit more at peace.
You are. You definitely are. All right, let's jump straight in. I'm going to try to get as much information out of you as possible in the next
Sure.
hour. So, what age should we start having conversations with our kids about body safety?
From birth. And I say that not because we should be talking about body safety as in, you know, abuse, but we can talk about body autonomy and the things that we're doing to our children. So, for instance, if we're going to help our child, we're changing their nappy, or we're cleaning up and wiping something off their face. I'm just going to wipe your face now. I'm just going to, put this cream on your bum because you've got that rash, and we've got to get, we're just explaining those little everyday things that we're doing to them, and we're not doing it without realizing that it's their body and they have a right to, it's their body. But yes, we're doing it because we're trying to keep them safe, protect them, and keep them healthy, but it's still their body. So we want to explain every little step that we're doing with them when it's their body, right? And then when they get to 2 or 3, as they get a bit older, we're talking to them about body safety in the concept of their own body. You know, they can say no to being hugged or kissed, or, do you want, giving them options. Do you want to put your jacket on for yourself, or do you want mummy to do it? Like, would you like to try and wipe your bum, or do you need help? Giving them the options to do it for themselves, but also modeling that we're asking them for consent when we do things. Is it okay if mummy helps you wipe your bum? Okay, great. And so we're not, just doing it without their consent or without the thought process. But body safety is basically everyone has the right to feel safe at all times, and we can talk with someone about anything. So we all have the right to feel safe, you, me, our kids, and that we can talk about anything at any time. So they're the two concepts that we work around. But then there's smaller safe body safety topics that we do, or lessons that we do. What does it feel like? So our early warning signs, you and I, we grew up with that gut feeling. We know when something's not right, but we're very good at dismissing it and ignoring it because we've been told by people to not just get on with it. Let's go. Let's not worry about that. Well, we don't want our kids to ignore their early warning signs because their early warning signs are going to tell them whether something is safe or unsafe. So we want them to try and find those early warning signs. So as little as 2 and 3 years old, we can say, what does it feel like when you feel safe? And they can identify. And we don't always talk about unsafe. We're talking about safe first because we want them to feel, okay, when I feel safe, it feels like I'm getting a warm hug. I'm nice and snuggly. My heart feels very soft and, like whatever it is that they feel, and let them try and find the words for it. Or I like to, with littler kids, I like to explain how it feels for me and then get them to try and think about it for themselves. And then when we want to ask them, okay, well, when you feel safe, that's what you feel like. But what about if you feel unsafe or you feel scared? And what's it feel like when you feel scared? Oh, I get shaky knees, I get butterflies in my tummy, I get a headache, I feel sick, whatever feelings they feel. And we want them to have the language to be able to identify that, because when they feel that feeling, okay, well, the next step is, who can we talk with about that? What are the safe adults that we have in our world? Is it mummy, daddy, a nana? Is it a teacher at school or early childhood educator? Who do we feel safe to talk with about these things, and let them know when we feel unsafe? So that's for little people. And then you can progress on, you can add in things like, okay, when you feel unsafe, you know, who and what is unsafe. So we want to like talk about safe and unsafe behaviors. We give the language of all the body parts. They're just parts, right? So a lot of people get caught up in the fact that we wanted to teach little people, boys and girls, the full names like vulva and vagina and penis and testicles and scrotum or whatever the words are, but they're just other body parts. And the mouth is a private part. So these are our private parts, and the mouth is a private part. So we want to teach our kids that they can say those words without getting told that it's bad or rude, or they're just parts. Because when I was interviewing kids, the kids that felt really uncomfortable talking about private parts were the ones that couldn't tell police what had happened to them, because they were stuck in that moment of like, oh, I know I'm not meant to talk about this. I'm not meant to say anything about this. And so, or they didn't want to use the word, or they didn't know the word sometimes. And then, child sex offenders or predators, they use a child's naivety about their private parts as a way to groom them and to abuse them, because they can gamify that. They can make it a game that they're doing, which the child doesn't know any different if they've never been taught. These are my private parts, and no one is allowed to touch, look at, or take photos of their private parts. So we're introducing little parts all the way along. It starts off very young, but it's, these are my private parts. When you're having a shower together, or they're having a bath, giving them the flannel and telling them to try and clean it themselves. It's your private part. It's your job to clean your private part. Does that make sense?
Yep, that does. Yep. So, what are fundamental things parents should do on a daily that would help police officers then if anything were to happen?
Yeah, I've just touched on some of them. Make sure you're using the correct terms. Make sure that you're empowering your child to know that they're their private parts. No one else is allowed to touch or do anything with their private parts. Obviously, there's exceptions to that. If a child needs to go to a doctor for something, there's a rash or something. But, we teach them in their body safety and body safety rules that if that a doctor or a nurse might need to look at their private parts, but as long as their parent or a caregiver is there with them. We don't let anyone else touch or look at them without mum and dad there, or whoever's their safe person is, right? And we teach them that, these are the things that groomers will do, is that they will, trick a child into thinking that it's a secret between them. So we want kids to know that we don't keep secrets in our families. There's a difference between a safe secret and an unsafe secret. A safe secret is something with a time limit. It doesn't last forever. No one's getting hurt or feeling unsafe. And their early warning signs aren't going off, right? That's an unsafe secret if any of those three things are happening. A safe secret is there's a time limit. It's not forever. Similar to like knowing like a surprise birthday party, it's going to end eventually. No early warning signs of going off. You're not feeling sick or upset, and no one's getting hurt, or there's no unsafe things going on. So, that can be a way to help teach your kids that, when to come to a parent or an adult or someone safe when any of those things happen. So we need to empower our kids from as young as possible to know the differences between them. But we're never talking about sexual abuse, or we're never actually talking about abuse. We're talking about safe and unsafe, inappropriate and appropriate.
Right. That makes it a lot easier for me to digest. Recently, I saw a thing on social media that really struck me. It said the most common predators of child sexual abuse aren't strangers, but it's mainly people close,
Uh-huh.
including like family members or friends or
Yep.
even step parents.
Yep.
And whilst that's pretty horrifying to sit with as a parent, especially when uh, I'm in a loving relationship, and everybody that may be listening to this may be in a loving relationship with either your child's parent or a step parent. How can we as a parent in a relationship still protect their children from the imaginable, potentially from our loved
Someone
one?
close. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, over 90% of child sexual abuse is by someone known to the child. So if we look at it from the statistics, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys will be sexually abused before they reach 18. And 30 to 50% of all child sexual abuse is by another child. So we've got to, when we know those facts and we know those things, we know that, okay, there's a high probability that if my child was to be sexually abused, that it's going to be someone they know, either someone that has in their direct family. Around 47% of it will be someone actually in the family dynamic, whether it be a non-immediate family member, a grandparent, an uncle, an auntie, a cousin, or around 25% is by a parent. Sorry, 25% is a non-immediate, 15% will be a father or a stepfather, and then 5 to 6% is between a brother or stepbrother. So we need we need to be mindful that it is going to be most likely someone known to the child. The next step to that is it's someone we've introduced, a friend of the family, someone who is a teacher or coach, or something that we're allowing our child, or someone who we've invited into our child's lives. I mean, that's horrendously scary. When my daughter was 3 years old, I stepped into this position of knowing all of this. And so I had a choice. I had a choice to make. And I had a recent question on social media is, I have always done my due diligence since I knew this. Anyone who came into my child's world were all kind of under the microscope until I had assessed the risk, right? Didn't matter if they were a family member, didn't matter if they were a friend, they were all under the microscope. So it was more about, it's not everyone, but it can be anyone. So I'm sorry, even my own husband had to go under a microscope. Even myself, I had to sit with myself and go, am I a safe adult? What does that look like? What do I think a safe adult's characteristics are? Then I looked at my husband, then I looked at the next person, which was grandparents. Then I looked at, uncles, the aunties, everyone around my daughter. And it's not just those immediate family members that could potentially sexually abuse them. They could be caring for your child on a sleepover, for instance, and let someone stay over and not have the same amount of, do the same amount of supervision or due diligence, or just checking that we would, right? So if I entrusted my child with her grandparents, for instance, and I'd already assessed the risk and thought, okay, these people are safe for her to be in their care, but they didn't think about things like I did. They didn't, understand that, it can be someone in your home or in your family, and then they let someone stay in the house whilst my child's in that home, then they're adding risk. So it was about me assessing everyone individually for their own merit, trying not to make any assumptions or accusations anywhere. And even my own parents came under that microscope. My own father, my daughter's grandfather. Yes, it's around 95% of men versus women offenders. So men are more likely to offend, but women are more likely to trust men in their homes and allow things that might not be quite safe. So, it's not just about picking out men, because a lot of the time I do not gender any of my content, because men are still safe as well in that they want to protect their kids. So we just need to remember the risk is who is safe and who is unsafe, or what behaviors are they displaying. I don't believe any words that come out of mouths. I look at behavior and I pay attention to behavior. So I don't know if I answered that question.
No, that was great. So just to touch on, so sleepovers. So how can parents protect their children at sleepovers without making them feel overly restricted or fearful and still allow
You can't.
sleepovers?
You
You
can't.
can't.
No. You can't allow your child to go to someone else's house and think that you have any control over what happens in that home. It's a different scenario when they come to your home. You can make the decision to make it easier for yourself by having kids to your home. But I don't think parents, the everyday parent who hasn't spent time, analyzing this stuff and educating themselves on this stuff, the everyday parent doesn't think about who's going, who is supervising, who's going to be there, what sleeping arrangements are there, what's the digital safety going to be like, what is there any rules around when they can all stop using their devices at night, is there any rules around who's allowed to sleep where, how, what, are you checking them throughout the night so that they are actually sleeping? you know um a friend of mine said nothing good ever happens after midnight. So for me, I'm like, yeah, you're right. All the sleepovers I ever went to, if we stayed up past midnight, there was nothing good going on. So, like sleepovers, as well as, they can be a fun rite of passage. You don't control your child or that environment at all. You have no say in what happens to your child when they're in that environment. And unfortunately, I'm not saying I'm not anti sleepover. I am pro safety, pro assessing the risks. And if that person you let your child go to doesn't have the same values and beliefs and safety precautions in place, then we don't know whether your child will be safe in that environment. So it's not worth the risk in my mind.
I really liked how you touched on what time like devices would be turned off, because usually at the end of a sleepover the TV comes on, and there was things that I definitely saw. I didn't even have a phone as a child, let alone social media. But I still remember, and I spoke about this on social media not long ago, that I remember like these porn videos going around and the
Yep.
older kids showing me.
Yep.
Um,
That still
I'd
happens.
be horrified if my kids saw what I saw, and the chances of them seeing it
It's more.
as to my chances that I didn't even own a phone. This
Mm.
was sent via text message. This wasn't just on YouTube or social media, but the chances were so much slimmer back then. I'm assessing everything like you are now when I'm going, like who's coming and who's going. And do the other kids, are they allowed free range of iPads? Are they allowed free range of phones? Okay. Like, how would I then say to that parent without sounding crazy? And this, because I love Gabor Mate and I reference him in a lot of my podcasts because I witnessed myself doing it. When I think about speaking to that mum about, oh, like I know you let your kids have the free range of their phone in their bedroom, but when my child's with them, with you, can we not allow that? And then I go into, oh, I'd sound crazy, like, oh, and that, but my reference to Gabor Mate is, he speaks about how we hold on to our relationship or our perceived value with another individual more than what we do of the right from wrong, what feels right in our intention. And he talks about how when our intuition is speaking to us like that, when it's saying that you need to speak like this to this person, but you're worried about losing or changing your relationship with that person. I hope I'm
Mm.
making sense.
No, you are.
That's something that actually makes us sick. He's a doctor.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen him speak in person, so I do understand what you're talking about. I also think, like, going back to that early warning signs, right? That's an early warning sign that that that's an unsafe situation, which you should probably speak up to. And if you can't protect your child against that risk, then why put them in that risk? Does that make sense? Like, I have
Absolutely.
said no to so many sleepovers, and my daughter's nearly an adult now. I've said no to so many sleepovers. I've always explained to her why. If I didn't like if I didn't know the family properly, why would I send my child to someone's house that I'm complete strangers to my child? Like, just because your child knows their child at school doesn't mean you know them. Like, I don't understand where we got this idea that just because we know them through the children know each other through it's like your child meeting someone in the street and saying, let's go home together. They might know each other in a classroom setting, but they don't know the child or what's going on in their house, or that if they're being abused in that home, if they're being safely shepherd through life. We don't know anything about any child's relationship or situation at all. And we expect our children to go to each other's homes. It's a bit different when it's family. But again, still, I had my own podcast. I interviewed a mum who she had a very close family relative who was charged with child sexual abuse, and she had listened to her gut. This person had asked for her children to come and stay with them. This person had, had there'd been heaps of red flags. Everyone was ignoring red flags left, right, and center. But because of her own personal experience with child sexual abuse, she saw the red flags, and she made sure that this person never got close enough to her own personal kids. They ended up abusing some of the other children in the family and all of this stuff. So, and we talk about the fact is that she saw the red flags, no one else did. This person was manipulating and, grooming everyone around them to ensure that they had access to these children, and yet no one else noticed it. And the thing is that it's our job to protect our kids. So if you get that moment where you think, oh, I know that they let those kids have access to like unsupervised, unrestricted access to the internet. Well, first of all, any child under the age of 12 going to a home like that, they're going to be looking at porn. They're going to be on the internet all night. They're going to be on TikTok. They're going to be on things that they shouldn't be. They're seeing things that are very dangerous for their mental health. The pressure to be in that moment. I mean, do you remember what it was like to go to sleepovers and everyone was forcing you to do things you didn't want to do?
100%.
So that's going to happen again. So in your own child. So I guess it comes down to, is it worth the risk of your child's safety? And remember, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys will be sexually abused. It's not worth it. So you can always make adjustments. Like there's these ideas of like sleepovers where they stay until 10 o'clock and you pick your child up and they go home. Or you have it at your house where you know that you're going to be the safe adult. You're going to make sure. In my house, when I had a sleepover with my child, it was everyone's iPads or everyone's devices got put in a central location at 8 p.m. and the movie went on, and that was it. That's all they had access to. Do you think people wanted to come over to my house when it came to high school? No, they did not. I did not care. There was me, they were allowed to talk to their parents. They were allowed to go home. They were allowed to do it. I basically straight up said to all parents, this is what I do every time. This is how it happened, what happens at my house. I always made sure I knew the parents. They had my number. I went and met them at the door. There was no dumping and running to my house. I always communicated with them before a sleepover. Hey, this is what we're planning. No, this is who's going to be here. These are the adults that are going to be in this home. No one else is staying here. No one else is coming here. Because a lot of the other things that happened whilst I was investigating these cases is that, kids would go to people's homes and then the parents would have some friends over and a child would get abused in that home, or an older sibling would be the abuser of a child that was in that home, or someone, or there was a cousin or another friend of that brother over, so it's really, these are the things. I've got a blog post on it if anyone wants to read it, and it steps out all of these things to consider and how to mitigate the risk or reduce the harm or just choose not to.
If your child were to tell you that a caregiver touched them, took photos of them nude, or made them do something that made them feel uncomfortable, as a parent, how do you respond to them?
Well, first of all, if a child comes to you and tells you that something like that's happened, you tell them, thank you so much for telling me, for trusting me with that. Um, I know from my experience that most children, I mean, on average, a child sexual abuse victim takes 24 to 30 years to tell someone for the first time. 99% of men and only 84% of women ever tell anyone that they've been sexually abused. So, it's really important that the first words that come out of your mouth are positive. You, you could be freaking out inside, but you need to keep control of yourself and know that your child hasn't told you because they want to ruin your life or make it difficult, or screw your relationship up, or whoever's the person doing it. They've told you because they think that you're going to keep them safe. They've told you because they need you to take control and be the adult, and keep them safe from the person doing them harm. So you need to be mindful when they tell you something. You're going to say, "Thank you so much for telling me. I'm so proud of you. That must have been tough." Whatever words that come out, they have to be positive, because that child, the other thing that most people don't realize is that a lot of kids are trying to tell people they're being harmed, but the first person that they tell doesn't react properly, and they never tell anyone again. They won't talk to police if they get a bad response for you. They won't talk to child protection or a psychologist. They will clam up and they will never speak again if your reaction is to overreact and like freak out, or to tell them that, are they sure? Do not say, are you sure? Because I know it's hard to hear from your child, but we need to make sure that we don't make them doubt themselves. They've already taken a big risk in telling you, because if it's by someone who's been grooming them, or, or they've been told that they're not going to be believed anyway, that no one's going to believe them, that they're going to be told that, if you tell anyone, they won't love you anymore. So they're taking a big risk in telling you in the first place.
Do you ever recommend asking a young child directly if someone has touched their private parts?
Not really. The reason being is that if they come out with yes, it could be seen from police standards, it could be seen that you've coaxed or coerced them into talking. It's more that you need to use open-ended conversations and open-ended questions. So tell me what such and such. Tell me about what happened with such and such. It's not did they touch you, because that's a closed question, yes or no kind of thing. You want them to lead uh the answer by saying, tell me what happened with Kristi. And then if they've said, yeah, such and such has happened, and they've already said that something happened, okay. The other thing is that we as parents want to get all of the information and the real nitty gritty details down. It's probably not advisable from the standpoint of me as a ex-police detective doing this job. It's not advisable for you to go, okay, so they touched you here and then they did this. What did they do next? What did they do next? Because you're also going to make your child shut down, because it's interrogatory. You want them to be open. You want to be, okay, so thank you so much for telling, and like be positive as they're saying things. Yeah, okay, you might want to think about, okay, if it's happened, when it happened. Okay, when did this happen? Okay, it was the last time you saw such and such. Okay, thank you for telling me. Is there anything else you want to tell me about what happened? Is there anything else that I need to know? You think I need to know? If they were able to tell you. Sometimes little kids, especially 3-year-olds, can't tell you in great detail what's happened. So it's just you do your best, but try and lead with, you don't want to ask, did such and such touch you when you were there? You don't want to, every time they come home from, dad's house when they've gone on, had their weekend with them, did dad touch you anywhere that they shouldn't touch you? Like if you're doing body safety education with them, you're going to talk about the body safety rules. Your body's your body. No one's allowed to touch your body. My body's my body. No one's allowed to touch my body. And, like you're going to help them understand that that's the rules anyway. And if someone does do something against those rules, they're going to understand straight away, and they're going to tell you anyway. They're going to come home and go, Mum, this happened. So if you do those conversations, and you create that beautiful, open, loving relationship with your kid, that where they can talk to you about anything and you don't freak out about it.
What if the child is known to have a big imagination, tends
Hmm.
to fib, maybe a bit dramatic? How can a parent know when to take it seriously?
So I guess from my point of view, I would talk to my daughter about being honest from a very young age. We don't tell lies, because that can hurt people. We don't so it's one of those rules, and like when you tell me something really important like this, I will always believe you. But if you tell me something that isn't true, and I believe you, you could hurt you, me, and everyone else. Remember, I talked to you about being safe and everyone has the right to feel safe? Well, telling lies actually makes people unsafe. And it means that we don't know whether you are telling the truth or not. So it's really important that you tell me the truth. Are you telling me the truth?
I'm listening to you, and like the everyday family, do they hold this level of communication?
No, no. That's why I do what I do now. It's because I think, I mean, to me, this is how I speak to kids all the time. And this is how I did my job. I was able to talk to them about this. It's really important you tell me this. And this is how I spoke to my daughter. It's only through through what I was taught through interviewing kids and talking to so many kids that I learned it's really important to talk like this and how we can talk like this. When we give that like dialogue to them, and we can do that from such a young age, I think that was, I don't know, it was just a pure stroke of luck that I spent as my, I became a police officer when I did. I became a child interviewer when I did, because, my daughter grew up with me talking like this around her and having these conversations with her and, going through the process with her. So she was, I look back and I go, wow, imagine if I hadn't have done that.
Yeah, I don't think it's luck at all. I think it was all supposed to be so you could be here today, because even just what you said just then, it's a lot of people haven't been around families that have that communication, that level of communication. I
Yeah.
can't
No,
articulate the words.
well, connection and communication, like, it's funny because I didn't teach my daughter. So I would sometimes catch her out in a fib, and like, all children, all adults, white lie a little bit, especially if they think they're gonna get in trouble. So one of the ways to ensure that your child never really wants to lie is for them to always know the expectations of what happens if they lie. So for instance, my daughter would be like, okay, have you fed the cat? And she'd be like, yes. And I'd be like, are you sure you fed the cat? Because I hadn't heard it, saw it, there's no rubbish. She's like, yes, the cat's just eaten it all. And then I would go into the whole, well, if we don't tell the truth, we don't know if everything's correct and safe. The cat can't feed itself. And I used to explain what would happen if you're lying about these things. And because I already knew that she hadn't fed the cat, right? So, and then she'd go, oh, okay, I haven't fed the cat. I'll go and feed the cat.
So most families would blow up. You can't be lying to me. Bah, rah, rah, rah. Then that teaches the kid, I guess, to lie more
Don't
and
talk.
better
Yeah,
to
don't.
do it.
If I lie, I need to keep the lie because then I'm going to get in trouble. Yeah, I didn't ever really do that. I mean, don't get me wrong, my daughter has done things where I've like lost it because her safety's been put at risk or whatever. But we always had like conversations around safety. Like we were always talking, and not just about body safety, crossing the road, why we put our seatbelt on, why we need to wear floaties, or why we need to learn how to swim better, or, when she got older, why we need to ensure that someone knows where she is at all times, safety walking to school, safety going to the beach with her friends when she was a teenager. She's now got a license, talking about all of the different ways to be safe whilst driving. Going to a party on a weekend. What would happen if this happened? And I used the language of what would you do or what could kids do if this happened? So it wasn't about, so we were already, before she was able to going to a party or going to the beach or whatever, we were like, "Oh, well, what could you do if something like this happened on the weekend? What could you do if, or we'd hear something on the radio and I would say, oh, wow, that sounds really scary. That kid got in a lot of trouble. What do you think? Why do you think that kids sometimes do those things? And we were always like talking about the behavior and the thought process, or the behind the scenes thoughts about why people do silly things. Why do kids need to, do this and do that? So I was in, hopefully, and I do this a lot, with all sorts of people, not just my daughter. I was trying to get her to use her critical thinking so that when she was in situations, she could critically think through them and she would make a better choice at the end of the day. I mean, we all make mistakes, but what maybe some of the reasons why our kids make silly mistakes or silly errors, or they don't know how to be, is because they don't actually know how to think through the process of doing things. So they're acting on reactionary versus actually thinking things through.
Yeah, wow. That must have been, I'm putting myself in your position now with having a daughter that's now got a license. That must be,
Terrifying,
yeah.
terrifying, but at the same time, very good. She's actually a really amazing little driver, and she's very cautious. And she comes home and she will talk about like other people's driving and like, why do people have to do this and why do people do that? And like she's very good at driving. She's very good at perceiving problems because she's done a lot of problem solving in her childhood. Like, this is the problem. This is how we work through it. What do you think you would do?
Social media. What's your perception on how we can protect our kids from social media, and when can we give our kids social media? Because I know already now, like in our community, a lot of kids are getting access to kids' messengers, and a lot
Mm,
of the parents are like, "Oh, but it's okay because it's on my phone and I have control and I get
yeah,
to read it and stuff."
false perception, isn't it? When you give your kids a social media account, you basically sign over their lifetime of data to that social media company. You don't own anything that they post or say. You don't own any of their information. That it's basically belongs to Meta, and Meta has around 48,000 data points on each of us. So every bit of information that they can glean from you, from everything. And Meta also sells our messages. So Meta sells our messages. They sold our Facebook Messenger messages to Netflix. So information that we put in those messages isn't safe. So that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that we've got this perception that if our children don't connect through social media, that they're not going to have friends and then they're not going to connect. And it's a bit of a fallacy because my daughter didn't have social media until she was technically allowed social media, and we had multiple conversations, multiple fights. Why won't you let me have this? And even with all of my information, all of the things that I've done, kids will be kids. They want to be like their friends. But at 15, she came back to me and said, I was on a holiday with her, swimming in the pool, nearly drowned because she said to me, Mum, thank you for keeping me off social media for so long because I actually had a childhood. And I have to get her on a podcast one day for her to repeat that because I'm sure people think I'm lying, but no, no word of a lie. She said, all my friends are so concerned about what they look like and how to be up to date with everything. And they feel so bad about themselves because they're comparing themselves to each other. And I didn't have to worry about that until I was 13. So I guess you got to ask yourself, why are you giving your child access to the social media, which we know is inherently bad for their brains, bad for their development? Is it because you're being pressured by society to do it, or is it because you want your children? Is there some belief that you've been sold? Because we have a lot of beliefs that aren't our own, that we've been given by people, by our families, by friends, by society. And social media is really good at tricking us. I mean, TikTok has a range of ads right now trying to trick us into the fact that TikTok is good for kids, helping them learn. And you know what? I'm a grown adult and I have an addiction to social media. So, what do you think that's doing to our children's brains? In fact, my now nearly 18-year-old said to me, my generation is fucked, Mum, because we don't know how to spend time together. We don't know how to talk to each other. We'd rather message each other sitting next to each other than actually talk to each other.
I'm finding this even with I was caught up with a girlfriend yesterday who's very like-minded, and we're caught up at this place. It's called Midway Farm, and we got a
Oh,
pie
yeah.
or whatever, and but we're still talking about like food and lunch boxes. And my daughter had her first lolly the other day, and I'm now
Mm-hmm.
getting. I was talking to her about, I feel sorry for Ziggy, like she's getting to know other kids who, might not, don't have the same restrictions on them, like with
Mm-hmm.
their
Mm-hmm.
food or
Or
their
choices. They're not
yeah,
restrictions, they're choices.
choices and or devices. And um I've been like I was like looking at my daughter when this happened, and she had these puppy dog eyes on, and I was just like, oh, far out. Like, and that listening to you and talking to you, I'm like, no, Ebony, like, stay true to you. But I guess like you don't want your kid to be the odd one out
They're
or
not going
get
to be. They're not
they're
going
not
to
gonna
be.
be.
Do you think that not having access to a device makes them the odd one out?
Depends who you're around.
I
It
know.
can
So maybe
be.
you're not choosing the right people to be around. I would say this, there is not a lot. If I look back on my time and I look back on my parenting and stuff, there is a few things that I regret, and one of them is giving my child a device so young. Because she was 3 and I had no idea. It was like back in the first generation iPads or whatever. We had no idea what we were handing our children. I mean, we didn't have, YouTube and all of these things. They are unrestricted, unsupervised access for people to get into your families. They basically, you're handing over the key to your house that your child now has access to. They have, like, if you're a visual person, imagine someone, a stranger, putting their hand through their device and basically climbing into your child's room. That's how it is. So we can, like, there's so many beautiful ways to talk to your kids about this. And I would say the best bit of advice I can give you is say not yet. It's not a no, it's a not yet. Not yet, because this is our family choice. We don't begrudge anyone else having it, but this is our family choice because we know that this is the right decision for us. One day, not yet, but it's not a no, it's a not yet. Because eventually school's going to force them to have it. So you're going to be in that battle very near future. But for now, why not just like play in the garden and watch silly kids, ABC Kids or Bluey, or let your kids have a bit more of a. It's so funny. I laugh at myself all the time. I don't know about your parents, but my parents used to say, stop watching TV and go outside. You're going to get square eyes. Now we're like, get off that device and watch TV. It's crazy.
Me and my mum talk about it all the time. Like she used to force me to sit in front of play school because she's like, yeah, I couldn't get you inside. You always wanted to play outside. But my older brother, we were talking about this the other day. My older brother would be like, Mum, like, just keep her inside. Like, he just wanted to play with his friends out in the street and not me because we're a
Have
bit
you
older, so he had
followed?
to come
Yeah,
and look
yeah.
after me. Mum was saying you're a bit of a liability. So she was like, I had to force you in front of play school and you'd scream. You couldn't even sit in front of a full show. But what I was going to say before, what me and my girlfriend were talking about yesterday when we caught up, is what we find really hard is like when you catch up with other mums or there's other parents around and like we're at a social setting
Mm-hmm.
and
And they
some
pull
kids,
the device out and they give it to them.
yeah.
Yeah.
So then you go from seeing your kid playing
To
to
being sitting
I
there.
my daughter, I feel, and this is the thing, I shouldn't feel sorry for her, but I just do when she's looking over at this other kid's device as if like, what's this, mum? What have they got? What's this show? And
Yeah,
then they're glued to it.
exactly. And can you understand why it's so dangerous? I think
Yes,
the
definitely.
I mean, I think the way to talk to little people is it's not an all the time thing. It's you know, there's got to be a way to identify, like, okay, and whatever happened to sharing? Why don't kids sit around the one device watching the one show together and share? Like, we used to
Kids
sit
don't
around.
share anymore. It's like this thing. I was just
Exactly.
thinking about this on social media the other day because I even said to my following, I was like, if the second born comes into the family, so this is where I'm at right now. I've got 2 kids, a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old, and so obviously I'm not buying the baby new toys. The baby just gets the daughter's
Just
old,
share them. Yep.
and Sage I just placed near Ziggy. But no matter what goes in front of Sage is pulled against her. So I put it out to my social media community because I know there's a lot of people that say that kids aren't able to share below the
Mm.
age of, say, 5 or whatever. They don't have the brain, whatever, to be able to understand it. So I put on and I said, what do you do? Do you do that the baby has their own new toys or do they get the old toys? Because I'm thinking,
Why would you go out and
Ziggy,
buy more?
no, sorry,
What
stuff
about
that
toy libraries? Like,
yeah, well,
you
I've heard
go,
of them.
yeah, why wouldn't you go to, like, or you could go to like a toy library and get like a few toys just for your baby, and then you're only borrowing them and you can change them out every couple of weeks.
Yeah, but it's hard. Even if we
I
have
don't
the
even think
our own
babies need
toys
toys,
now,
to be
I'm like,
honest.
how to teach a 3-year-old that no matter what Sage touches right now, Ziggy wants.
Mm,
And like everything's mine, everything's mine. And then you're going, no, you're sharing. Like this is it. And I'm
mm.
like, oh my goodness, what's everybody doing? But there is a lot of
It's
talk about no sharing.
Yeah, so I don't think there's a problem either way, but I know my mum had this problem. I remember her telling me the story that I was so bad at sharing, she took me to the doctor because she thought there was something wrong with me. And it was because I hated anyone. I was a major control freak from a very young age, obviously. But like it's an age old problem. Like it's not something that's exclusive to your child or that means that your child's an issue or whoever, right? I think though, there should be, and I remember my mum, I had a Cabbage Patch doll and I wasn't ever made to share that. It was the one toy that was mine and exclusively mine, and no one else was allowed to have it. And no one else was allowed to play with it. And maybe that's the idea. Like, okay, these are the share toys and these are just your toys. And then, these are just baby's toys. And so it means that these are and, it does get easier as they get older. But, like, I think the thing is that when you're going back to how this all came up, is that, I personally would be like, oh, I'm trying to think of a kid's name. Oh, Johnny, is it okay if, is it your oldest Ziggy?
Mhm.
Yeah. Is it okay if Ziggy watches your iPad with you? Oh, that's so lovely. You're such a nice boy or nice friend.
But what if you don't want them to?
You'd
Johnny,
mind.
turn it
Oh,
off.
oh,
Go
oh,
play.
oh, Johnny. You know what? Why don't you go play on the playground? Here, I'll hold on to your iPad for you. I have done that, and I have been known to be that parent that makes a big comment in front of all the other parents going, oh, wouldn't it be great if all the kids played on the playground and put their devices down? Oh, yeah, yeah, great. Like, I have been that parent, and I'm sorry, guys. Like, we, as parents, we can do better
Yeah,
for our kids and for ourselves.
preach. I went to a gym and I went into the creche and I was so excited to take my firstborn to the gym and took her to the creche and I was like, awesome. She's sitting up, she can was crawling around and it was this playpen and
Mm-hmm.
then like all the everyone worked out next to them. And I got there first, so Ziggy was in the creche first, in this playpen first, and I was so excited for her. I'm like, awesome, she's going to have to play with other kids, and
Yeah.
there's all different age groups. And I went to do the warm up, look back, and there's like all the kids that have been placed in that playpen have been given iPads. I was fuming. I was off it.
Mortified.
And then I ended up making a comment to a mum, just being like, said about, isn't it so sad that because Ziggy now was looking at the back of all these iPads. She didn't see any faces of these kids.
Oh, that's
And there was probably about
terrible.
7 kids in there, and I was fuming. I actually cancelled my membership and never went back because I was like, I don't want my kid to learn this is
No, that's
how
fair.
but why is no one else seeing it?
Because we've been groomed by social media to think that this is normal. That we have been conditioned and groomed to think that it is normal for our kids to live on a device and never see faces. Do you know that children are growing up with face blindness where they can't identify people's emotions via their faces because they only ever watch devices? So face blindness is something that, it was known to be attributed to some people with autism. But now we have children who actually can't recognize when someone's angry, sad, upset, hurt, or anything. Why children are actually unable to feel and understand other children's emotions or other people's emotions because of being in front of a device with no personality, with no, no showing of facial emotion, facial expressions or whatever. Children, little kids especially, and I'm not the expert at this, but children are need you to have conversations with them, need you to talk to them. And how can we teach safety if we're not talking to our kids? So my advice would be social media and all of this stuff is that if you can delay it for as long as possible and keep it to a restricted amount of time because it's not for every time. I mean, I'm not bagging parents out there. You want to have dinner with your husband or your partner or whatever and you want to get through a dinner without like all hell breaking loose. Totally okay to pull the device out. But don't just like ram it in their hands the minute because you're sick and you don't want to deal with them. Because that's another type. Why did you have children to begin with? Did you have children to make them robots? Because that's what we're going to make.
If we haven't already.
Well, there's always a way to backtrack. There's
There
always a
is.
way to stop. And, I know I was in a group, I'm in a parenting group, and there was this thread about YouTube. And this mum was like, I've just banned YouTube because I can't handle what's going on, the obsession with YouTube. How long does the freaking tantrums last for? And I couldn't believe how many parents had also banned YouTube. And they were all like, it takes about 3 to 5 days. The tantrum. We banned YouTube 6 months ago. Best thing that ever happened. we, and I mean, the e-safety commissioner in Australia is talking about banning YouTube for under 16s. I can see why. It is actually highly dangerous because, I've seen so much inappropriate content on there that there's no restrictions to kids seeing that. There's no way you can stop them from seeing it. So,
What about video games too? Like my little brother, he's 21 now, but I was talking to my auntie about this the other day because she for I think I can't remember the age. I'm going to get it wrong, but I remember when my little brother was turning maybe like 7 or 8, and he was given a R-rated video game for birthday or Christmas or something. And my auntie, who doesn't have kids, she saw it and she was like, "Oh, who's giving you this?" Like, and then he told her, and she was like, "Oh, like what? Like this is R-rated." And what about them as well?
exactly. Exactly. Would we allow our children to watch a live sex show? Would we allow our children to be in the same room as two people having sex? Or would we allow our children to be on the street while someone's doing something illegal? Or, I mean, look, there's an argument. I mean, gaming isn't so, well, to me, I'm in two minds. When we give children R-rated games at a very young age, does it set them up for thinking that that's normal, that behavior is normal? And when we let children have unrestricted access to gaming and unsupervised access to gaming, especially online gaming where they can have access to anyone in the world, we're allowing anyone to come into our child's world and potentially groom them and abuse them. And we do know that that happens. We know that kids are being exposed to inappropriate content, you know, suicidal content of people being killed, all of the eating disorders, all of, bestiality, all of these things are happening within these gaming groups and within these gaming. And that's something to be mindful of. You can't just hand your child a device or let them be on a game or any app for that matter that allows them access to the world, billions of people, and not know that that's going to happen. It's just naivety. You're just being willfully ignorant if you do.
It's coming up for me because parenting's bloody hard, and
It's massively
sometimes
hard.
like we live quite rural. We live about half an hour out of a city, and then we're about an hour and a half from family. So anytime that we need to go anywhere, and both of our kids hate the car, where the majority of people would just put an iPad on the back seat, and it's just do the easier option. I feel like I'm in the season now where I am just trying to choose the easy option, in
Mhm.
which I also have to always figure out what is it easier for the long term and harder in the
Yeah,
sorry, in the short term and
in the
harder.
short term, hard. Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, but we haven't given up. And I said on social media not long ago, I'm like, oh, I did a video. I was in the front seat and both of the kids were screaming in the car. And I was like, 3 years on of this, everywhere we go, every day. And I've still not given into an iPad. And sometimes I question, like, it would be so much easier, but I still won't do it.
Uh,
I still won't do it.
I mean,
But
it
parents,
does get easier. I mean, our parents didn't ignored it. Like they got on with it. I mean, we might have caught a smack out of it, but like it's one of those things. One of the things that I would say is distracting your child, giving them other options, feeding them, all of those things that you can do whilst you're in the car, um, to just connect with your kids. Because the
talk
thing
more.
that the talk
Talk.
talk and make those connections, because one of the things that is missing from our kids today is feeling connected not only to their families but to their social networks. And if we don't teach them how to have conversations with us, then how can they have conversations with others? So, oh, look at that, look what's out the window, oh, what's this, oh, teach her how to play I Spy. One of the things my nieces and nephews and even my own daughter loves about her grandmother, which is my mum, is that she plays with them and she talks to them and she's silly, right? And I look at her and I go, oh my gosh, you were such a miserable parent. Like you did none of this with us. And I'm thankful that she does it with our kids, because it's so fun to be around, and no wonder the kids love her because she's so much fun to be around, and that
And
she
then
play.
We get to be the miserable parent.
Yeah, well, pretty much. Then she said that. She goes, "Look, when you're a parent, you just don't realize how fun this is, and then when you're a grandparent, you hand them back, so it's funner. So there's heaps more fun in it." And she taught them how to play card games, even the 3-year-old, and the 3-year-old doesn't play properly, but everyone just goes along with it. So, like I think it's just about being, I guess, asking yourself, what kind of childhood do you want your children to have? Do you want it to be filled with the easy road options, which are basically stealing their joy, stealing their creativity, stealing their choices, putting them at risk? Or do you want to, and I'm not saying don't give them an iPad now and again, but do it strategically, make those decisions and stay with those boundaries. Don't move that boundary line all the time because it suits you. If you make a decision about giving them a device only when they're in the car, well, you're not going to be in the car 24/7, aren't you? So, maybe that's something you only do in the car to help with the 1 hour drive to a family's house, but no other time you ever give it. And you load it up with pre whatever episodes of Bluey or something like that. So it's never anything that they can actually get online for.
And they don't have the reach on the back of the thing. Yeah, I have to think about
But
it. The
but
thing that scares me is the 3-year-old not knowing when she can and when she can't, and it's like, "Oh, do I bother
well, you
arguing?"
just you explain that to her. It's only for this. This is a special treat only for in the car. But I'm not saying do it. I'm just saying there's options, and you just stick with that.
Okay. So I actually want to know, coming back to parents, and you touched on something a little while ago, and it made me giggle because I do have it here that I want to talk to you about. I want to know, when should parents stop showering or getting
Mm.
changed in front of their kids?
When the child says so, or when the child indicates that they don't want you to be naked in front of them anymore.
Okay.
And you look shocked at that, because if we're doing things that are if we focus on safety, I mean, it could be also yourself, right? Your child might never get sick of having showers with you, but you all of a sudden go, wow, they're going through almost in puberty, or I'm not really comfortable with this. Then it's your choice. It's not about, because the thing is that, and people say, I have been criticized for saying, you shouldn't shower with your children, but if everyone's respectful, that we're talking about, like, oh well, you wash your bits and I wash my bits. I'm not touching my child. Like we're continuing those themes of body safety, and and everyone's safe in that environment. But the minute they indicate, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, I don't like, around about, I think it was about 9 or 10, I noticed my daughter was getting a bit more shameful, like she was starting to develop. But she didn't care about us seeing them. But I said to her, you can always stop having like being open and honest with, like, you don't have to have a shower in front of us, or I never forced it. It was never a thing that she chose. It was always her choice to do whatever she wanted. Mind you, she's 18 and she walks around, or nearly 18 and walks around, and she's the most open and free about her body than I ever were. So,
Well, she obviously feels very safe around you.
yes, I think so. And I think that's the real key to it, is that if there's an overwhelming safety theme in the home, you only ever do what you ever want to do. You never have to do anything you don't want to do. It's your choice, your body, you do what you want. Then it's not about when, it's about when it feels for you. Like, there's no date on it.
So basically, what you're saying is just listen to your kids and
Yeah.
do as they ask for you.
Yeah, well, model safe behaviors, model respecting their no, model uh, talking to them about it. Like, hey, if I notice that, you're nearly at puberty age, if you ever want to stop having baths with your sister or brother or whatever, like, you don't have to. Like, you can have a bath whenever you want. You can do this on your own. Like, you don't need me anymore. I used to say, I used to say to her, you don't need me to have showers with you anymore, but I love having showers with you, Mum. I'm like, okay, well, when you're ready, you can stop. Like, it's not about yeah, it was more about her having that choice and when she was ready. And and I think that's the thing about kids, is that if we don't make it shameful, but we give them power, then they'll voice that power when they're ready.
That's beautiful. I hope my daughter feels comfortable. Well, I hope both my girls feel comfortable forever to just be nude and, in
Yeah.
front of each other. I think I don't know, it's cute. Like I have my girlfriends and we still change in front of each other, and um it's nice because it makes you feel like they trust you and you
Well,
trust them.
they accept all of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm bringing you back because I'm thinking about this time that I was at my dad's house, and my dad and his at the time wife. I was in the bath with my little brother and we're 10 years apart, and I loved having baths with him, but I was probably now approaching puberty. And she came and sat next to me in the bath one day, and I never forget it. And she said, Eb, Dad's not, I'm just letting you know that Dad, so this is my stepmom.
Uh-huh.
And she said, I can't remember the word for word she said. Basically, she said, um, like, I've spoken to your dad and you're I don't know, transitioning to a woman, whatever she said. And I think it's best that dad no longer comes and sees you in the shower, bath, or whatever. And I was kind of just like, yeah, okay, whatever, like cool. But
Uh-huh.
I look back on that and I really respect that of
Mm. Mm.
my stepmom, and that was all she said. And then that was it. Like
Mm.
dad, but
She
then
was
no
setting a
longer.
boundary for you.
Yeah, I've for some reason I've held on to that memory,
Mm.
and it just sparked my memory in my brain. Yeah, to have someone advocate for you, basically.
Yeah, and I think though, as parents, we can do that every day. Like we can advocate for what they are comfortable with, what they want. We can advocate, hey, do you want a bath with your little brother today, or do you want a bath on your own? It might be easier to have a bath together, but at the same time, we've got to remember these are individual people with individual wants, needs, and whatever. And if we're allowing our children, you could always, say, hey, it'd be easier if you do have a bath together, or do you want to go first? And then he'll jump in after you. Like, so I think, and then getting to that age, I remember when my daughter was getting to puberty age, and I had a conversation with my husband around, like, it's not because he's comfortable, she's comfortable, everyone seemed comfortable, but I wanted to make sure he wasn't overstepping in a time when she was becoming like changing. Her body was changing, and I just said to him, "Hey, if she doesn't want you to be anywhere near the bathroom when she's in the bathroom, can you please make sure that you ask her first? Like, it's up to her whether you get to see her like that now." Like, and so I just said and I actually said it in front of both of them. I said it to him first, like in a quiet conversation. I said it to her first, and like, and hey, if you don't want either of us to see you now because you're going through, we notice. But we'd already been talking about puberty. We'd already been talking about the changes in her body. We'd been talking about the fact that she was going to become she was going to start menstruating, and we'd been talking about masturbation and sex and and pornography. By the time she actually showed the signs of being there, we were already all over those conversations, and it was just a formality to say, hey, you know, and it was always a formality, but it was a formality in that I said to my husband, please make sure that if she doesn't want you to see her, be mindful that she doesn't, you shouldn't walk in on her while she's changing. You should always knock. And it was more of a, let's just respect her privacy. Let's respect her body and how it's changing. And even now at her age and living at home, we always knock before we barge in. Like, we don't just barge into her bedroom. We don't, we knock on the door. We wait to be invited in. It's her room, her space. It's her choice.
I'm just thinking about all the people that could be listening to this who are around my age, who this would be triggering right now, moments and micro moments in their childhood where they didn't feel like their voice was enough. So now in their 30s, they're trying to figure out their voice, their feelings, and whilst raising children and doing the same. I don't know about anyone else, but I feel like in the moment, I'm like getting, it's like I freeze. Like when I'm talking to my daughter Ziggy, and like, because we're coming to 3 and we're coming to those times where I'm like, okay, I know I need to start talking to her about body and stuff, but I just go into freeze
Mhm.
because you we all you want to you kind of go just to how you were raised and how you were programmed. Like that's your first
That's your
initial
default.
default, right? and then you go, then your mind turns on, and then it goes, no, I want to do it differently, and I want to communicate, and then I just go, "Duh."
It's just
And
because you
then
don't have the language. It's just because you don't have the like little tools that we've picked up or I've picked up that, when we're talking to our kids about this, like you're aware of them now, right? You're aware that you freeze because you're like, oh, what do I say? So then you just go, okay, well, I just need a few little things to get the conversation started. I just need a few little things to help me get there. Okay, what does it feel like? Or what is something that we're not allowed to do when we're in the bath with our brothers or sisters and other people? Like, and if they don't know, you go, "Oh, I know one. Do you think it might be something like this?" And you're just talking them through like the process. You're making it a bit of a game. Like I used to make things a game. My daughter had this flannel and it was like a little puppet, and when she was washing her body, like she would be in the shower and it was her flannel, no one else was allowed to use it, and it was a puppet, and we used to like talk to this puppet, and I used to make it a game, like I can't remember what her name, I think her name was Mrs. Flannel. Mrs. Flannel, who is allowed to touch Charlotte's private parts? And like that's my daughter's name. Who is allowed to touch Charlotte's private parts? And I would make the noise of like, no one but Charlotte's allowed to touch my private parts. And I just made it a game. So we don't need to be so serious with it because it's not damaging or detrimental or scary to kids. It's us who have added our adult stories onto it and made it scary.
yeah, okay, cool. All right. I'm getting there. I feel like I'll have to listen to these podcasts like weekly for the next year
No,
until I
you
can
won't.
really get there
You'll be
because
fine.
it's so true. It's a language. It's like learning how to use the language is really hard. Another thing that's been circling around in my women's circle a
Hmm.
few months back, we were talking about it is parents and having sex. So
Mm.
some kids have been raised to hear and see their parents having sex, or they're
I struggle with that because I've got trauma around that. I am
and
so traumatized by my stepmom and my dad having sex and hearing it that I can't even fathom the idea of that. And I think it's actually quite traumatizing. It's
it
actually
is
so I don't think children should. Would you allow your children to watch porn?
no,
Would you allow your children? We've got to ask ourselves, like, I don't think it's okay. I don't think it's okay. Like, I get that you got to try and fit it in where you can, pardon the pun, but I get it, but the thing is that it's not for children. If we're telling our children that sex is not for children, and that's what we should be, the dialogue around teaching kids about sex is that it's something that adults do, loving adults do, and if we want to talk to them about pornography, well, you know, that's something that is like two people pretending to wrestle, like especially for little kids. We're not going to talk about sex. We're not talking about penetration and all of that. It's two people pretending to wrestle in there while they're nude, and it's not for little people. It's not for kids. We don't look at that stuff because it's not for little people, and it's something that loving adults, do when they get older, because we want children to. They just don't have the brain development to understand that, to really get that. Plus, so I don't think that having sex in front with your kids. I mean, don't get me wrong. We've all been there where like our kids have, and this is the kind of relationship I have with my daughter. My daughter said, and I nearly died. My daughter came to me later and said, "Oh gosh, could you guys be?" And this is when she was about 13 or 14. Can you be quieter? And I was like, oh my God. And I was devastated. But she felt safe enough to say something. Like how nice is that? And my usual comeback was, well, at least your parents still love each other. And she laughs about that now, but and she's got her own boyfriend and her own life that I would rather not know as much about as I do because she shares it with me. But like I look at my childhood and I had no one to talk to. So the fact that my daughter and I have a close relationship, she can talk to me about it. I think that's like, I feel that that was what I was aiming for when I first had her. But I don't agree with sex in front of children, or where they can, yeah, the odd occasion it's a mistake and they accidentally hear it. Well, you can't, but it shouldn't be in front of children. In fact, I had a question like this in my DMs, and it was a couple that were living in their in-laws, and they were sharing a room with their kids and like trying to, have sex whilst the kids were in the same room. And she asked me, she goes, is it like, do children remember? And I said, well, after 3, their memories get longer, but they don't generally remember anything before 3 when you become older.
Don't do it. Just don't do it.
Yeah, so I'm not,
Because if
I'm not a
that kid
fan.
wakes up, they're lying there in freeze response,
Yes, exactly. I mean,
and they
you've
just
been
have.
there. I've been there. I used to want to vomit in my mouth.
It's just it's
It's
traumatizing. It's
disturbing. It's
disgusting.
disturbing, and it's not okay. And it's yes, it's beautiful and loving when we're
No,
at when we're. But yes, it is when we're actual adults and we understand it. But for children, it's not.
for
It's not
children,
something
it's,
children that they can understand, they can comprehend, and it's not something they should have to.
and
And
they're
if we're
definitely
trying to
not going to be lying there going, "Oh, they're making love. How beautiful."
no,
They're crying and dying inside.
and if we're trying to protect our kids from child sexual abuse, are we? I mean, there's no research on this, but could we be, making it normalized that this is what people do, and this is if someone loves them, then they will do it in front of them? It's actually, I would highly look. I've seen cases and I've investigated cases where an abuser has had sex in front of kids, and so for me, it's like very borderline. Could be considered child sexual abuse. So.
Yeah. So, what boundaries should step parent relationships, or when your child goes to the other parent's house, how do we protect our kids on those weekends? And because I couldn't imagine, I'm too much of a control freak. If me and my partner ever were to split, which uh, one is unfathomable, but that it happens, right? And then I have to send my kids to his house. I don't know who's going there. Yeah.
I
How do
think
we
it would be, this is the sad thing about child safety and body safety, is it usually falls to um, the
boyfriend?
mothers. Well, no, what I'm saying is that um, you're talking about who's most likely to abuse them. There is a much higher risk of children being abused by a step parent, in a stepfather mother relationship. There's a massive bit. One, child sex offenders target single parents, single mothers, to be able to get access to children. It's a known fact. They do that on purpose. Number 2, there's a risk in that if it's not your child, you're less likely to feel as protective over them. So there's some studies around that where they believe that that's why they're more likely to abuse them. I've seen it time and time again, so I can totally um, totally confirm that there is the higher risk there. But going back to the body safety and child safety stuff, mums are the ones who generally talk to their kids about child safety and body safety. Mums are the ones who are left to talk about this stuff. Mums are the ones who are left to make these decisions. Generally, not always. Mums are the ones who step in and say something if someone's acting inappropriate or doing, generally, not always. So this is where I think dads could step up. Dads need to be more involved in these decisions and these conversations, because if you do separate with, and I do have a lot of good and really amazing dads in my who follow me, and they follow me knowing what we know now, that it's most kids are at risk from adult males and males relatives. So they follow me, but they'll contact me and say, I have these conversations with my kids. I'm trying to protect them from mum's new boyfriend. I'm trying to make sure that they are safe, and make sure that they know that they have the right to all of these things. So some of this stuff is more about it's just about teaching your kids, whether you're mum or dad or whoever, that everyone, new parents, new partners, everyone knows that this is what we teach our kids, and this is what's right, wrong, or otherwise. Stepping in when you think that stepping in when you see but people pushing behaviors or red flag behaviors or things like that. I don't think one of the key things that I see in those sorts of relationships is behind closed doors, or, this new parent or this new partner is behind a closed door with a child. That's a red flag. Showering or bathing. I don't think it's appropriate for an adult of any description that isn't a parent to bathe with their children. So that's a red flag. Um, and very common way to groom children is to bathe with them or have showers with them, be behind a closed door with them. Asking to take them places, special little treats and special little things, giving the children treats and making them feel like basically love bombing them. I want to just get to know the kids. I want them to like me, but it's not everyone included. It might be just one child, because that one child is open to the grooming, whereas the other child might be like putting up big red, like, don't touch me, don't come near me. That's a red flag. Those are some of the grooming behaviors that I see in those relationships. So
Can you please better explain to me what is grooming?
grooming is like a series of behaviors or a series of characteristics that someone shows in order to groom a child. So if better word would be friending up, like friend up the child. So it starts off with love bombing. So you're amazing, you're great, like getting the child to feel indebted to them, or like that the and it doesn't just happen in to the child, it can happen to the parent as well. Like you might have the person, making the parent feel really good about themselves in a situation, or they've become best friends with them. Basically, this person's like come out of nowhere, and they're like this white knight in white shining armor kind of thing. They're like offering to have the kids, offering to help. They're doing stuff on the weekends with you and stuff like that. So they're grooming the parent, but in the meantime, when they're grooming the child, they're like telling the child they're awesome, they're amazing, you're so special, no one gets you like I do. And they're basically making the child feel like there's no one else in the world but them that they can trust. And in that process, they're offering them gifts, they're keeping secrets with the child, they're making the child feel like they can't talk to their parent because the person's putting a wedge between the child and the parent. And then they will send them, if they're older or if they've got access to a device, they might send them pornography, or they might send them nudes, or they might talk to them about whether they've kissed someone before, or if they've ever been, they'll start sexualizing the relationship. And then there'll be some abuse along the way. They'll be touching them, running their hands along their body or something like that to see if the child will tell anyone. And it's like a process that they're ticking off boxes. And then when they know that this child won't go to someone and report the abuse, then they abuse them.
Do you think, or have you seen that most like older children that groom little kids, they're also being abused at home?
I mean, this is a interesting conversation because when I first started in the police in 2010, we saw that most kids who were showing, it's called harmful sexualized behaviors, when children harm other children, when they abuse other children, that's the terminology. And when we saw kids with harmful sexualized behaviors abusing other children, most of the time it was because they were being abused in the home. Towards the end of my career in 2020, most of the time when we saw children harming other children, it was because they'd had access to pornography. There were some cases where they had been abused as well, but it was much more prevalent that they had access to pornography. They were doing what they saw on the pornography to a younger child.
And this is just comes back to why we just all parents need to stick together when it comes to really, really protecting our kids from social media, and we all need to do it together.
I mean, look, the government, I'm in two minds about the social media ban and online safety bans. I think the Australian government is trying to give parents permission to say no. They're trying to help you enforce those rules and that comes I think into effect at the end of this year. They're trying to allow you the freedom and the space to say no to your kids, because the peer pressure that's involved in like saying yes to your kids about this stuff is really massive. So if we can say no, we can bring in age restrictions, we can bring in some like verification laws where these social media apps have to bring in age verification. They have to verify your child's age. And it just gives an option. I mean, my daughter seems to think that it's a good thing. She thinks that kids need, right, need some safety from social media and online because
So
we've
did you
got,
say that government is trying to say that social media?
yeah, they brought it in. It was legislated last year that they would bring in a social media ban, and it starts at the end of this year. So
Right. Okay,
effectively
cool.
from the end of this year, I mean, parents are still going to circumvent it, but from the end of this year, you won't be, it will be against the law for your child to be on social media.
I know we're getting on to time now. We're hitting an hour and a half, but something else I wanted to come back from is because I'm just thinking about the chances of people listening to this are going to be thinking back to that one time or the multiple times. What would you say to those people who are in the statistics of hitting their 30s and starting to realize that what happened to them wasn't right?
I would say that and I know, I mean, I've had some suppressed memories that have popped up in the last few years, and you'd think a lot of us, it's an interesting phenomena, really, because we suppress all of our feelings, emotions, and everything. We just get on with life. We think that happened when I was a kid, I'll just get on with it. But when we hit our 30s, and especially when we have children ourselves, it is automatically going to bring up any suppressed uh, memories of abuse. And sometimes we don't realize it happens because no one talks about it, right? So whether it's trauma from child sexual abuse or it's trauma from your own childhood abuse, like neglect, psychological abuse, physical abuse, whatever, it will come up when you have children. And so a lot of us parents are struggling with what happened to us as children and trying to reconcile how to parent through that. And um, I really do appreciate and commiserate with a lot of parents because I have myself had to go through this process. I would say to anyone who is sitting here going, "Oh, shit, like she's just spoken about all of this stuff that my mum and dad did, and or whoever's done whatever to you," I would say you've already done an amazing job by listening to this podcast. It can be hugely triggering to hear all of this. What I would say is that just sit with it for a bit and just understand that nothing that happened to you was your fault. Nothing that happened to you was your fault. You were a child. You didn't deserve anything that ever happened to you. You don't there's no reason why it should have happened, but it did. And so when you're ready, if you want to do something about it, you can. If you don't want to do anything, you don't have to. But I would highly recommend finding yourself a great counselor, psychologist, someone to work through all of those feelings and emotions with, because to be the best parent you can be, you're going to need to do that. Because it's going to pop up over and over and over again. I can talk from experience. I had trauma at the age of 7, 12, and 15. And do you think that I did not realize at 7, and I started realizing it when my daughter hit 12, but every time that my child hit to that age limit or age group, I thought I needed to be admitted into a psych ward. So it's really interesting once you know that this is going to happen. So do what you can to be the parent that you want to be. You don't want to. I mean, I came to the conclusion recently, or like in the last few years, that the one thing I used to say to myself all the time is, I don't want to fuck my kid up. I don't want to traumatize her. That's what I was saying to myself all those years. And I came to the realization that I can't do that if I'm still traumatized and fucked up, basically. So how do I make sure that she doesn't have the same trauma I do? Well, I got to go fix it.
We're the generation
Gonna
that's
break it.
fixing it. That's for sure. I got my psychologist appointment this afternoon. I can't wait. I've got some community questions here for you,
Okay.
and then we'll wrap it up. Best questions to ask kids to check in with them.
Okay. Well, I guess it's about whether you actually get into deep conversation with your kids. But some of the things that I would say to my daughter in it doesn't always have to be about checking in with them. We can do it sneakily through a side door. So some of the ways I used to ask my daughter, if she was giving me nothing, she was giving me crickets and she wasn't really talking to me when I said, "Hey, how was school? Hey, like what's been happening? What did you like about school today? What did you hate about school today?" All of the techniques that other people have talked about. I would say, "Hey, what's happening with your friends at school at the moment?" And that was usually a good way to get into what's actually going on in the group. Especially when they're in primary school or hey, how's such, I'd talk about the other person that she saw. I wouldn't talk about her in that moment. I would have a conversation about everyone else around her. And that was how I could glean what was going on for her if she wasn't ready to talk, because she would talk about the little interactions she had with them and what was going on for her around, like whether it was with grandparents or whether it was with other people. So I never actually directly asked her. Well, I did, but I never. If I was getting crickets and she wasn't giving me much, I would ask her um, questions about everyone else around her first, and then I would go into, oh, well, you told me this. Well, what was this about? Also, kids can't lie when you know every little bit about everyone else. They don't lie, by the way. They tell no, you know what I mean. They can't like keep you in the dark if you know every part of the what time they spent with them. The other thing I would suggest is make sure it's in somewhere like a car. You're sitting next to them, having a snuggle in bed at night. You're not looking face to face at them.
Can I make a suggestion as well? Is that be an active listener
Exactly.
because I know I can. I did like a I've been going down the route of like communicating effectively over the last
Hmm.
few years. One of the things I've noticed about myself, and I can think off the top of my head someone that's like this who it's like when you're like a bit anxious or you've got social anxiety, sometimes we like ask a question and then we go because and da 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 da.
Yeah,
And it's not just being an active listener where you're stopping and then just shutting up to wait to listen.
yeah. And
And
that happens for kids too, right? Like my daughter fills in the blanks. I actually did this with my husband the other day. He asked me a question and I waited and I only had to wait like one breath and then he tried to fill in the answer. And it was so funny. He's got ADHD, so I'm used to it. But at the
yeah.
same time, I started laughing and he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Well, you asked me a question, but then you answered it for me. So do you want me to answer it now?" And that's what we do for our kids too, right? Like we sometimes will ask them a question, but we won't actually wait for the answer.
I think so. Yeah, I think, and I'm very much like this. So I'm thinking like, oh, you really just have to be able to ask a question and then shut the fuck up.
Yeah, it takes practice and it takes consciousness. Like you have to consciously be there. I mean, interviewing children and interviewing people in general when I was a police officer meant that I had to be quiet. So I got really good at like waiting. But I don't do it very good when I'm not feeling like it. Like I can be, answering questions, but this doing the same thing my husband does. I can ask a question and then try and answer it for myself without actually waiting for the answer. And how frustrating is that? So yeah, definitely the active listening thing. If you really kids can tell the difference if you actually want to hear them and know about what's going on for them. They really can tell.
Our second question was, how did you introduce the conversations or actions to watch for
Well,
this?
maybe they're talking about the fact that, like when you want to talk to other adults around your child.
I think you've answered this also in just every day.
I will add this. So I get a lot of questions from people about, oh, I don't know how to talk to my family about the fact that we're teaching body safety, or I don't know how to talk to my family about the fact that I don't want them to do this anymore. And so my advice to you is to try and get people in to your team. So how you get people into your team is you say, hey, I've just been like, and with grandparents, for instance, that your grandparents, like, I know that some grandparents aren't really good with respecting boundaries of children. They just think, oh, well, I'm the grandparent. They just do what I tell them to do. So I used to say things like, hey, I noticed that you don't wait for permission to hug Charlotte, or hey, I noticed that you tickle Charlotte even when she says no. I know that you don't do that on purpose. I know that you're just doing that because you love her and you love that time together. But we're teaching body safety with Charlotte at the moment, and it would really, and one of those things is that we respect no. So if she says no, I really need you to stop and stop doing what you've been what's happening, because that was how I would introduce body safety. I'd be like, okay, we're teaching Charlotte body safety at the moment, and I know you really love your grandchild and you would hate for anything to happen to them.
When that person turns around and goes, oh, and like slobs it off, disregards what you've just said, and
What do
you
I
get
say next?
fucking triggered, yeah, and you get so angry, what
Well,
do you do?
then I say, oh, well, so you're okay if people do this outside of you? Like, I know that you're not going to try and abuse her, but do you know what you're teaching her? You're actually teaching her that it's okay for adults not to respect her no.
And they go again, they say it again. They're like, oh,
Then,
here we go again.
and then
Oh,
you know
far
what?
out. You and your woo-woo stuff.
Well, you know what I would say?
Okay.
Nothing, and you don't get access to my child unsupervised anymore.
Okay. Yeah.
Because anyone who keeps pushing like that is not a safe adult. That,
Mm.
first of all, they're not going to listen to your child when they tell them that something's happened. And second of all, they're not going to teach your children that they should be respected. So they do not deserve they have shown me that they are not a safe adult. They do not deserve that time. And I have cut people off. Out of my you can have supervised contact with my child, but only when I'm there. And you don't have to explain or help them understand. Oh, you don't. Oh, why don't you leave the kids with me anymore? Oh, it's okay, we just don't need you to look after them anymore.
Amen. Thank you so much for your time today. Where can people
You're
find
welcome.
you?
Probably the most active place is on Instagram, which is Kristi McVee. You can find me on TikTok, but definitely, definitely Instagram. I've got my own podcast, which is called Conversations with Kristi. But also, yeah, check out my website. I've got heaps of blog posts about sleepovers, safe adults, all of these conversations we've had. There's blogs for everything almost. So, go in there and have a look around. And, if you've got any questions, that's where you're going to find answers.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.